I knew there was going to be trouble as soon as I had the I saw that the VPN was on. Yeah, thanks, Vanguard Master. I just saw your message. Although I'm wondering why I'm hearing Discord messages. Okay, cool. Thanks, Vanguard Master. Yeah, so not my favorite experience, let's say. This one I can't blame on the this one I actually can't blame on Rogers, but yeah, the I think the VPN's to blame on this one. Anyway, I will probably just throw away the start to the. I'll just throw away the start to the stream on this one. I'm really getting tired of having to do like more than one video on YouTube. I don't think it works well. I think it's irritating, and I don't know. I pay enough for this internet. Like, I don't want to. I don't want to sound too whiny about it, but like I do pay for a better internet than package than I normally would, um, because I want to do the streaming thing, and it's an expense that I'm willing to take on, especially because people have, subbed to the channel. They've shown their support in all the different ways, and I think I don't think it's too much to ask for me to sort of to do my part in terms of making that making it worth watching. But no worries, Dozer Trouble. Although if it was because the stream cut out, that's actually on me. But thank you for stopping by. It's always nice to see you, however long or however brief. I hope you have a good night, and I hope we can hear this. But yeah, no. Anyways, like it's one of these things where I'm willing to accept that sometimes things happen for broadcasts, or sorry, for internet service providers. But when I have 2 weeks of streams and a meaningful subset of that gets interrupted due to the ISP basically shutting the stream down for seemingly arbitrary reasons, and especially when I'm getting so many calls to upgrade my internet package, I think there's a certain point where the deal is not being satisfied. So, anyways, I will obviously I'll deal with that on my own time. I don't need to subject all of you to that. All right. I'll get an autosave as well as a little bit of money from this. So 55 BDE9FF. So we don't have the 55 on its own now. I would prefer to start with 1C1CE9 then. So 1C1CE9. But then that gets me a 55 and no... Oh no, 55 BD, but then no E9. Okay, so if we do 1C... Yeah, no E9 there. 1C, 1C, E9, 55 BD, but still no E9. So if I do... do one of these, BD. Ah, that's a trap. There's no FF there. Yeah, no problem, Vanguard Master. Actually, I'm really distracted right now, so I'll reset and see if I can get a more favorable... All right. Should have seen if there was an FF. Unfortunately, there isn't. Okay, so somebody... somebody got suspicious for some reason. Alright, I don't get why I can't, Sure, I'll accept that I can't do anything to him.
Let's settle this like grown-ups.
He's almost certainly going to turn around. He's just standing up again for some reason, but at least I can grab him. Obviously, there's a bunch of people who are already patrolling around and, you know, upset, so I'm not too... not too fussed about the stealth.
Took you long enough.
Iris Tanner, I'm supposed to get you out of here. They didn't hurt you?
No, we were still in the negotiation phase. They made a pretty solid case, so it was only a matter of time. Push came to shove, I'd rather slave under Raffin than be chopped into little pieces.
We'd best get a move on.
I'm not going anywhere without my ride. It's sitting in the garage.
That wasn't in the spec. At least tell me it's fast, this ride of yours.
No, it wasn't the spec. And no, it's not particularly fast either. Let's say it's between you and me, huh? I'll make it worth your while.
We'll see how things play out.
Order 1377, Maddie G, batteries checkup paid. Order 1477, Chris, bearings replacement adjustment paid. Order 1577, Eddie and Jim, circuits electronics reinstallation paid in advance, setup installment plan. Order 1677, Dingo, basic renovation package for Columbus model, negotiable price. Note 44, turns out Glitter's got a bunch of stuff like cathinone, but short of someone camping out and watching how the Tigers make the stuff, no way I can get my head around the formula. Track down a lab first, then we'll talk, cause doing it ass backwards gonna take me years. Worth a try, that shit goes faster than fresh chrome in the city. Could take it cross country, branch out. Shit, we got the trade routes, all we gotta do is use them. Job to Iris Tanner. We have 2 tuned Galinos for repair collision damage at our place. Why me? Don't you have your own mechanics? Our mechanic also has collision damage. Can't work at the moment, and you're the cheapest. Cheapest? Seriously? Is that all you heard about me? Yeah, no fixer fee, right? You work alone, we like that, as long as you're good enough. Right, and we won't worry about the spam, I keep reading that. Alright, 7A 55, 1C 55, both work, but So if I can get a 1C7A, there you go.
Last fucking time.
I didn't realize. I thought I came in this way. Message from Koyo to Iris Tanner. We have 2 tuned Galenas for repair collision damage. Okay, we've read this before, so. Alright, I'm hoping the client's in here.
Thanks for taking care of my ride.
Don't mention it. Why didn't you want to work with Dakota before?
I'm not crazy about fixers. Might as well be pimps without the special favors.
Right.
Prefer lining up my own clients, playing by my own rules. When you're a lone wolf, there's no fixers waiting to steal a cut of your hard-earned cash.
So I take it this is an exception.
And the last, hopefully.
There is something kind of funny. Obviously, the idea of the fixer has existed much longer than sort of these platforms, but there is something kind of funny about hearing these kinds of complaints and comparing, you know, you're talking about the fixer's fee and such, in a time when it feels like every software product wants to become a platform, right? So a good example of this, of course, would be Twitch itself, where Twitch, for the most part, doesn't do its own content. As is always the case, these things are a little, you know, they're a little hard to pin down as really specific examples. So it would definitely be fair to say that historically Twitch, in fact, has made its own content. And I would say even today, they engage in it in a smaller way. But of course, the way that Twitch makes its money is it provides a site, it provides the infrastructure for people to, you know, to do their thing, right? So they don't need to worry about what is attractive online. They just need to worry about attracting people who can figure that out and attracting the eyeballs to do that. I'm just gonna talk with Dakota.
Jamai, brother.
Dakota, Iris Tanner, as per your request.
Sister.
Cut the bullshit, all right? I'm no one's sister. Just tell me what I have to do. After that, we're even.
She's not crazy about fixers.
No horse likes its saddle until it's hungry.
Only horse you've ever seen is in a picture book. Thanks for everything, V. Happy to return the favor sometime. Just make sure you get what she owes you.
V has nothing to worry about.
Thanks. Nice doing biz with you.
I'm listening.
But yeah, so the you know, the cut for Twitch is really high, right? 50%. V, it's Tanner. Thanks for handling my ride. As a token of my appreciation, I stashed a little something for you in the drop point by the Sunset Motel. I reckon that makes us even. Radio, take care. So we'll follow up on that. Yeah, 50% is a lot. So just for reference, for all intents and purposes, if you do a game or an app, you're paying about 30% to Steam or the Apple Store or whatever. Now they do, the environment's gotten a bit more complicated because there are certain discounts to that different platforms will give you. And then, of course, there is now the Epic Store, which charges a lower fee, but of course doesn't have the same audience as as Steam. And so, whether or not that's revenue maximizing to sort of try and direct people towards the Epic Store is kind of an open question. I think it also depends on the game, to be completely honest. So it'd be fair to say that Twitch is probably one of the more aggressive examples of how these cuts work. But what's funny, and Neil Stephenson's written some interesting stuff about this. You can see how the idea of trying to found a platform is very attractive to sort of venture capitalist types. But it's a lot easier to say that than actually do that. And in fact, if you think about it, like, so even in a gold rush, the conventional wisdom is that you want to be selling the picks and shovels. You don't necessarily want to be, the one speculating on a gold deposit. But if the entire area is only a bunch of pick and shovel companies, and nobody's actually going out mining the gold, that's not an environment in which anybody wants to operate, and that's also not going to be an environment in which there's prosperity, right? To give, like, the preposterous example of this would be, imagine every content creator, instead of doing Twitch streams, instead was trying to make their own Twitch or Substack or Facebook or whatever, right? That you no longer just have content creators, but they're also trying to make their own social media companies on the back of their audience. You wouldn't have anything to watch. So there is actually an open question. So I understand maybe as far as the investor is concerned, why they might be attracted to the idea of creating a platform. But I would actually argue that there's a specific set of circumstances under which that's actually a desirable, that's an actually desirable state of affairs, and then there is actually another batch of people who should probably be thinking a little bit more about what they do with those platforms. But anyways, it is always kind of fun to sort of think of the complaints about fixers and sort of the tax that they take for the connection, and see that in relation to some of the complaints we have today about platforms and people trying to establish platforms. Because to a certain extent, you can see, there's a lot of people who will complain about Steam's 30%. But as far as a fixer is concerned, right, Steam actually performs a lot of those functions. So it gets you in touch with the audience, your client. It also ensures that you're not really scammed, right? So it takes care of the credit card transactions, it takes care of the bandwidth. There's a lot of sort of the infrastructure of doing your job that Steam takes on for itself. It also takes on certain what some people might consider liabilities. Now, whether or not it's justified in taking the 30%, I think, is probably a question that a lot of people.
Well, V, there's this techie, Big Pete. He just made an appearance in the Badlands, only I'd rather he hadn't. Catch my meaning? I'm sending some info on this static scum your way.
Okay, gun for hire, get rid of Big Pete, a mechanic with the Wraiths. Big Pete runs a garage out here in the Badlands, fixes up clunkers for the Raff and Shiv. Now, before that, he was hustling as a techie in Night City. Now, Pete's not your definition of a nice guy. Soon enough, he made some powerful enemies and he had to skip town. Just so happens, Pete enemies are my friends, and I owe said friends a favor. You make Big Pete eat dust, I get one less favor to owe. It's not hard to find him, just try any of the Wraith's garages. All right, I am not Shodan, Cyberdog. How are you doing? I'm trying to remember the name of the person in the audio logs in System Shock 2, and I am completely failing to do so, so the moment has passed for that one. But I'm sure it would have been super clever if I was able to to deliver. You know, it's probably just as easy for me to... Oh, nope, can't system collapse because they're too tough. Okay, let's take a minute and see the bad guys. There's a few things that I can do to distract if it comes down to it, but I don't want to tip my hand too quickly. Well, I did have... there was a broadcast I did where I tried to use Copilot to sort of do a creative project that I had the idea for. Or I did, sorry, I wasn't really using Copilot. It was more sort of reviewing something that I'd used it for that I was reasonably happy in terms of the like it just gave me some results that I thought were kind of interesting and were maybe one of the few examples where there was something related to writing where I actually thought it did a good job. And the challenge is that I may not be a great writer, but I definitely feel like I have a little bit of an edge on it, let's say. And so as a result, my standards for the AI are quite high. Let's turn you off. But one of the things that was funny about it, like it just attracted so number one, I lost more followers on that day than any other day. But it did actually attract a couple of people who kept trying to claim that I was some sort of AI generated broadcaster, which is fair enough. I mean, like as far as a troll is concerned, I don't find that like a particularly hurtful one. Like obviously it was somebody trying to be disrespectful, but it didn't really make me reconsider my my life. Obviously I know that's not what you meant, but it was actually kind of a funny it was a little funny that I'm able to say honestly it's like, yeah, it's not the first time I've been called an AI. But yeah, no, I'm glad you liked the small sort of digression on. I may trigger the alarm. Nope. Okay, we're okay. I'm glad you liked the small digression on platforms. Just because, like, again, it's the thing that I always kind of find fun about these sorts of. Oh yeah. No, I please, Cyberdog, please do not take that as me as me being upset by that. Like I know exactly what you meant, and I think one of the actually, you know what, it's maybe not a bad example to sort of show how it can be really easy to sort of discern between like well-meaning and negative. Like one of the immediate triggers that you can show in terms of the fact that, you know, you didn't mean anything hurtful by it is the fact that, you know, you made a reference to Shodan, right? Now, you know, I can't have a name like System Shock or System Shock and not know a direct reference to the game System Shock. And frankly, it's on me if I don't make that connection. So, you know, in that case, there's like this recognition in terms of, I guess, where we're both coming from and that mutual interest. And in that case, you know, there's some thought that's being demonstrated in terms of the, I may be in a bit of trouble, but let's give it a shot here. Okay. Whereas, you know, if somebody's just coming in and one of my favorites is for people who like backseat or do anything along those lines, like they always try to be coy about it, and it's always blatantly obvious what they're doing. But anyways, I mean, these people are not a brain trust, so I'm, you know, I shouldn't expect more. But yeah, no, like obviously you're making a reference to the game that's in the title, and in that case, what you're doing is engaging with the with the stream and the broadcaster, and that's the sort of thing that I want to encourage. It's always kind of funny, right? Because you can see how the same statement can be taken in a positive way and a negative way, but it also probably shouldn't be all that ambiguous in terms of which one is going to be taken which way. Just because one is sort of, you know, meeting someone where they're at, you know, saying it's like, hey, I know you like System Shock. I like System Shock too, and I'm gonna, you know, demonstrate that in a certain way. And then, you know, somebody who's trying to be a jerk is, you know, not gonna have that that cleverness or that elegance. So. Yeah, well, I mean, I run into this a lot. So I am a little bit of I like to think I'm a pro-social troll in sort of like Twitch chats. I really screwed this one up. Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, like, so every once in a while I'll do like a silly comment, like somebody will talk about Sekiro and I'll be like, oh, you mean that Elden Ring clone? You know, From Software should sue those guys. And there's always at least one guy who's like, Elden Ring came after and they're the same company. And is like, I don't think it's that big of a secret that if someone's saying something like that, they probably know, right? Like, but what I have learned is that people cannot stop themselves from showing that they know more than someone else online, and they will fall over themselves to demonstrate that. Yeah, well, that's just it. Like, you know, I think there is a type of trolling which I can't even say is fully benign, right? Like, it's kind of winding someone up, but it's not necessarily winding, like, you can wind someone up in a way where you all kind of have a laugh about it at the end because you realize how silly the whole thing was. So, like, a decent example of this would be that at work, a coworker was, well, a bunch of us were working on this thing. So there's, you know, every once in a while we'll need to do a presentation to other groups. And, you know, it's sometimes very helpful to just have a one-pager on a topic that we know a lot on, that even someone in a very senior role can take a look at it and just sort of know the lay of the land, right? So, you know, I'm not going to be a quantum physicist. I'm probably not going to be able to do a full derivation of some of the, you know, the fundamental theorems. But, you know, it'd be kind of nice if I had to do, you know, if for whatever reason I was like going to some sort of presentation, if I could get, a one pager that's just going to give me some of the basics so that if I'm seeing this lecture, I'm going to understand. A one pager on quantum mechanics is actually probably too much to ask for, right? But like if I'm going in on a subject that I don't know very well, it would be nice to just sort of know some basics in terms of what's being discussed so that when I'm hearing someone more knowledgeable, I'm not falling over terminology, let's say. So, every once in a while for us, one of the things we want to do in our group is, we'll do these one pagers to get people up to speed. And of course, what that does is that it makes it better so that when we have a proper sit down with them, they have some basic ideas in terms of what the lay of the land is, and then we can start talking on some of like the important details. And, we've just generally found that sort of thing is helpful. But of course, it can also be very hard because if you know a lot about a subject and you want to convey as much as you can, you're going to want to cram that all in. And usually you wind up with a multi-page document. So for us, it's really important that we do this like nice one page, easy to see, sometimes with like a picture or something like that. Yeah, exactly. So anyways, it involved a lot of work, and this coworker obviously put a lot of hard work into it, but it was also kind of clear by the end while we're giving the feedback, and I try not to like stick my nose into everything, but I am also at this point a bit of a subject matter expert on some things that my section does. This just naturally happens when you're in an area and you've worked there for a bit, right? You gain a certain type of knowledge that other people find helpful. And so I was sort of brought in on a couple of things, and it was clear, like, I'd try and give as good a feedback as I could, but it's also really clear that they've been working hard on this, and some of the pressure may be getting to them a little bit. And we had to have a lot of revisions going in. So, you manage the situation as well as you can. You try and if tensions are running a little high, you try and present things as sensitively as you can. But the idea also is that you want to have the best product that you can, and so you also don't avoid saying the things that will improve it. Now, again, like I said, it's a one pager, and we went for this sort of landscape orientation, right? So it's almost kind of like it's almost like a table setting, right? The sort of thing you'd put your plate on in a restaurant or something. Not a high class restaurant, obviously, but and again, it just made it a little bit easier. You get to put the graphics and things like that on it. And usually if you're going to show a chart, and of course, it's work, right? Of course, there's going to be a chart, usually with a line going up. We went for that. So what I did, and this is just coming back as an example in terms of why I think trolling doesn't necessarily need to be what it's talked about today. I stayed quite late after work. And so once the thing is done, once the final version's been approved, we've had all of those extra rounds of feedback and changes at the last minute, because of course this is what bosses like to do. I just put a quick thing in our group chat saying, it's like, hey, just one more thing. I'm a little worried that people aren't going to be able to see this, on their phone. Could we do a portrait orientation of this, of this document? The joke being so first of all, one thing in the context of this is like, this is going to be a printed document, so nobody's going to be looking at it on a phone. But number two, of course, that would be a like ground up reimagining of the project, right? Like this little change that's being proposed basically would be like, can we undo all of this stuff that we did over a couple of weeks, for the most trivial stakes? And of course, like that is in one sense, I can't say entirely benign, because of course that's playing on all of the stress that came from the project, right? But on the other hand, like it's also so obviously beyond the pale. It's so obviously the sort of thing that is not, it's not like no person could take this as a serious suggestion. So like what happens is there's that tension that comes up as soon as you see that a change was proposed, and then it's such a huge and like frustrating change that you get a little mad at the start, and then the hope is that someone starts laughing afterwards because it is again so absurd. The only thing you can do is laugh. So I think that's a decent example of what I think is good trolling, right? It's not just being some kind of an aggressive, like we have a name for what a lot of trolling gets called today, and that's called being a jerk, right? We have had jerks since before the internet. They'll always be with us. And people who are impolite, people who are rude, people who, want to be bullies, or they want to make you feel small, or they want to attack like physical characteristics or other things. Like we don't need another name for that. That's just being a jerk. But I like to sort of reclaim the idea of being a troll in a way that it's like, okay, there's a little bit of meanness to it, because honestly, a lot of very funny comedy does tend to involve a bit of meanness. But it's the kind of meanness that like you can bond over. Just the same way that, if you tell certain jokes, there can be that tension that's built. You're maybe a little bit worried that someone's going to go too far, but then, the joke goes in a different direction. And again, everybody has a bit of a laugh because everybody sort of thought is like, oh man, this is going to be bad. But it goes another way. And I mean, some of it is just a chance to sort of show off, right? Yeah, exactly. And one of my prototypes for this is I really like the essay A Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift, because in the essay, right, it argues that the solution to Irish poverty is that, poor Irish mothers should still have lots of babies, but those babies should basically be fattened up for like the first year of its life so that it can then be sold for meat to the wealthy. And at no point does that essay ever come out and say, I'm just having a laugh here, right? It commits to the bit, and it commits to it in such a like strict way. It works out all of the details, and like the character that's created for that is so incredibly pleased with himself for this clever solution. And that's what makes the satire work. If it all of a sudden kind of comes out and nudges and winks, or it gives any indication that it doesn't think you understand what's going on, it completely destroys the magic. And Swift, of course, has enough confidence in his audience to pick up on the joke, that he commits to that. But I've definitely run into people that when I describe A Modest Proposal, they quite literally use that as an example. They use that as an example of how, how evil people were to each other in the in the old days. And I'm like, no. Like this guy, like, yes, there was tremendous unkindness, but the point he's making is about poverty. At no point did the English eat Irish babies. So, and high justice to all. Yes, obviously there's, we're definitely at a point where the flat earther point is, I will read these emails and go into some gameplay too. Flat earth example is actually kind of an interesting one when you scratch the surface of that one. Because the thing that's funny about the flat earthers is that to them, they, they're doing research, right? They're spending a lot of time reading on this subject. But of course, they're reading people that they agree with. They're looking for confirmation rather than information. And so, or there's, I think it was Edward Tufte who wrote this, but it's like, they're using data the way that a drunkard uses a lamppost for support rather than illumination. It's one of these things where, like, to a certain extent, if you were to sit down and like really have it out with them, you would actually see that despite the fact that they are being quite silly, they're for lack of a better term, very well read on their subject, right? Like they've really gone in deep. And of course, the problem is that what could have been a very positive thing, right? Because I think we all have that tendency to get into a hobby like that. You know, there'll be some people who are complete maniacs for Warhammer 40,000. Like there's a reason why that wiki has like 50 pages for every single entry inside there. Or some people like really get into computers. So like they'll build their own Linux distribution because that's just what they do. Or, you know, some people will kind of get into 3D printing or Bitcoin or, you know, whatever, like, you know, or music, right? There are people who will spend, you know, tens of thousands of dollars making a great audio system to basically make it sound exactly like they're in the room with those instruments. And they'll go on the forums and they will have, you know, all capital letter arguments with each other over those subjects. And it just happens that like there's this horrible thing that's happened for some groups of people where instead of directing it towards these things that we might find kind of admirable in their weird way. So like for me, some of my coworkers, they don't really have a lot, like they're sort of like, I am an incredibly strange specimen to them, but they appreciate it that like I am quite obsessive about words and phrasing. So like I have a style guide and a dictionary and a thesaurus at my desk. And I almost like the thesaurus, at least I will take out on an almost daily basis. And like, even on simple questions for somebody else's document, I will take the time to look that stuff up because to me, I care, right? This sort of stuff, matters because there is one of the, I don't know if I want to call it a formative experience, but one of these experiences that I had with a coworker when I was working at Starbucks. They were from Japan on a working holiday visa, and they sort of asked me because, you know, I liked reading and I, you know, reasonably well spoken. They said, is like, what's the difference between think, suppose, and idea? And I kind of just thought about that for a minute, and I'm like, there's clearly a difference. I would use each of those words in different situations, and yet I do not consciously sit down and think about which of those to use. And, you know, there's a few things that I can do. So, for instance, an idea would probably be a little bit closer to an object, even though it's an intangible one. Whereas, you know, think, that's a verb. You know, and then a supposition, of course, in that case, you're dealing with, in some cases you can draw those lines between maybe the thought itself as opposed to the act of thinking. But beyond maybe, you know, once you get outside like the obvious grammatical errors, you can definitely get into some situations where you could use each of them in very similar, if not the same circumstance, and people would know what you meant. But the point that I wound up making, so I kind of I did it in real time. I sort of tried to give them, it's like, well, you know, that's a really interesting question. And I'm not entirely sure I could give you a rule myself. I don't think that way when I use those words. But let's actually take some time and let's think it through. Let's try and find out some different situations in which we'd say those words, and let's see if we can come up with a rule based on the different sentences in which we'd say these things. And kind of the case that I made was that, you know, in some of these cases, you'll have people will know what you mean, but often the way that you have that perfect turn of phrase, or you have that moment where you really know someone is thinking the way that you are, you know, you've mildly altered their consciousness in a certain way, is when you actually don't just know a word to use, but you know the word, the one that's, you know, ideal. And there can be, as weird as it sounds, you know, you can have arguments about whether or not you should say, you know, significantly or highly or vastly. So I ran into some situation where like something like the sentence was something along the lines of, you know, this movie was highly underrated. And I don't really like that turn of phrase, right? I can find it a little bit more sympathetic to say it's highly overrated, right? But to say high under is weird. It may be like standard English. It may be something that's acceptable, and I don't think anybody's confused as to what it is. But you know, it's just one of those things where it doesn't really sound right. Once you know to like listen for it, it sounds a bit odd. And so again, you have lots of options. You know, greatly, vastly, significantly, considerably, massively. You know, usually there'll be a ly at the end of it. But to say something's underrated, it depends on the context. And, you know, if you were saying, you know, if I'm going to say something's over or underrated, that'll probably be in a more informal context. So in a situation like that, you'll, you know, you're probably not doing a formal document, but sometimes if you're doing something in a professional environment, significantly is like a good go-to, because that just like you just hear that word in more formal context. You can imagine being like working for a bank and seeing the word significantly. And then of course, if you're working in an academic context, statistically, significance actually has a technical meaning. Sometimes you may not want that technical meaning, so that's when you move away from it. But again, the difference here is that there can be that basic level of communication. You can take an idea and you can convey that to someone. But if you want to get really great at writing, and like I said, if you want to get to that kind of writing where, again, you're almost sort of altering somebody's consciousness, you know, even temporarily, and really like letting them feel that idea in a way that goes above and beyond just simply, you know, transmitting a point, being able to be nitpicky about those words matters. And again, you know, I would love it if somebody became a maniac for words and grammar than if they did flat Earth. But the thing is because I am a big nerd about speech and about sort of saying the right words and coming up with the right ones and learning new words, I always have that sympathy for the drive to keep going. It's just really that fact that they're not really people looking for information that keeps me from being too sympathetic. What about becoming a maniac for flat grammar? I don't know. I don't like, I don't think I like any writing or speaking style that could be described as flat. All right, I'm going to read a couple of messages here and we can carry on. Tiny Mike to Big Pete, you're my bro, man. Please, I really need the scratch. Jesus, Mikey, fuck's wrong with you? How many times have you come for me for Euro dollars? Where the fuck does it all go? Maybe I am your bro, but this time you ain't getting shit from me. Bro, come on, I really need it. I've been down on my luck lately, but I know how to bounce back. I just need an itty-bitty loan for an investment. Last time, I swear. And next-gen shit, I got the most Nova next-gen shit you'll ever lay eyes on, or more like won't. You'll know what I mean because you take it off my hands to move. I need a quick answer because they're already snapping at my heels. You in? Yeah, once upon a time, this was a chat about trolling and good and bad forms of it, but I kind of got I got a few other topics there. But you know, I will say one thing I will say for myself is I really don't. Yikes! I got very lucky there. Yeah, yeah. It can become quite easy to kind of despair about some of this stuff, but I've always kind of had the hope that by acting sort of consistent with the way I would like to see it, right? So going back to a time where you could expect that if Jonathan Swift came out and wrote, a new piece, and wrote it the way that he would have written, maybe slightly different phrasing and grammar, but basically if he came out and wrote a satire like A Modest Proposal, that people would get it, right? That we're at a point where we can read, The Onion and understand that it's not serious. I wonder if I can do, yep. It's one of my rare all threes. And again, I'm trying to figure out whether or not we've really lost the ability to do that. Because, the other thing is the one thing I'll say about the internet is, in addition to the fact that you can connect with a whole bunch of people who already agree with you, it does also make it easier to find some of these people. So in some cases, these may have been people that are, have always been with us, and it just happens to be that we see them publicly now, where previously, our paths wouldn't have crossed. But I've always tried to have the conviction that, act in a way that is not beyond our capability. And then you'll kind of connect with the people who are into that. And then from there, you'll sort of, you'll find your path. And hopefully, because everybody's having a good time and having a good laugh, with luck, more people will...
Rest of the crew?
Wouldn't count on it.
So I'm supposed to take the fall for a piece of shit jammer that don't even work?
Sometimes it shines and sometimes it rains.
Sound like my brother. Wait, you're the one who saved Tiny Mike.
Don't change the subject.
Mikey said you're a solid merc. Change your mind and I'll pay you. Kiss and see goodbye right after.
Might have read a convo between you and your brother. I know you're flat broke.
That's old news. I'm flush now. Let me go and I'll prove it.
Eddie's now.
They're on their way.
Start walking.
Of course. Thanks.
But yeah, obviously, try and act in a way that, sorry, I should be a little careful. There's some nuance to add to it
Fuck. Almost pissed myself.
as always, right? So there is sometimes a benefit in meeting people where they are. So if there's a style of humor that they may be able to enjoy, but it's foreign, there can be some benefit in trying to figure out how that might work. But yeah, I think for the most part, I didn't even know this was here. Fun.
Well, V, I hadn't expected you to be so accommodating. Still, let's call the problem put to bed. I'm closing the book on this one.
But yeah, for the most part, I think being able to try and show people, I don't know, it's like most things, actually. I've generally found that if I want to do something like weird at work, if I want to do something, something off the beaten track, I always find those the most interesting projects personally. But because, if it's like work is always a decent example of this, although I don't always necessarily think it's not the only thing you want to do with your time or your life, right? But there can be a benefit, if possible, to just sort of showing people what you're trying to do. And part of that came from when I worked at my old job. I had a project that took a couple of months to get going. And of course, I was building this really big database. And so one challenge about it was sort of this case where, like, once all the pieces were in place, it worked, and like it worked fast, and it did things that I don't think anybody really appreciated at the start. It could do, and like how it kind of solved almost every single problem we were having. All right. But I actually know there was a little bit of friction when I was working on that, simply because I don't think people really appreciated.
V, I've got quite an unusual one for you. I need you to deliver Trevor Brass's remains to the address attached. The young life inside was snuffed out by a Wraith's bullet. Trevor's parents can't bury their son until he's back home. You can help make that happen. I have attached all the info you need.
There we go. But yeah, it was just one of these ones where I don't think anybody really quite appreciated how all the pieces sort of fit together and how it works. So there's this couple of months where people are genuinely wondering if I'm doing any work at all. But once the thing was up and running, like you could kind of see there were some people who thought that there was magic. And I just want to be clear too, it wasn't really anything special that I did. It was just I happened to know a bit about how relational databases worked, how they worked in the context of the project that I was working on. And because I knew that, I could see so obviously that there was this very well understood. I mean, like relational databases have been around since like the 70s or whatever. And this was exactly what we needed. But because, there was just this established system that people had built, and there wasn't really a need to change it. And it was also one of those environments which really did have an attitude of sort of, we've always done it this way, so we'll keep doing it this way. So it was just one of those cases where nobody had even really thought to try the new way. And again, once it was ready to go, like I think it was something where the process we were doing took like a week to do, and we definitely needed to do it at least once a month. And on like a bad day, like let's say it's somebody doing it for the very first time, the systems that I sort of set up reduce that workload to about half a day on like a first time sort of tough job. And so, you multiply, 6.5 days by 12, you're looking, that's about 70 person hours that you've just saved, in terms of, ideally what you'll do is you'll just get them to work on something slightly more interesting. Because the other thing to remember was in that role, I wasn't like a database administrator, or I wasn't like a data entry guy. I was a full-on economist, and like those aren't cheap. So ideally when you have an economist, you are pointing them at economics problems and getting them to analyze them, not getting them to do data entry. Like ideally you're hiring a student to do that, because anybody can like type something into Excel. But yeah, anyways. But the lesson that I got out of that, and again, this can go from certain types of humor to certain types of writing or whatever, but I've learned the benefit of sort of the show me approach. So if you're going to do something off the beaten track, if you have a little version of the thing that you want to do, even if it's not ideal, even if it has imperfections, but you have like this microcosm of what this bigger thing can be, that is worth its weight in gold. And if you have a way of being able to build those projects in like little chunks like that, so you can sort of show a new bit, like little modules. And again, you can't always do that for projects, but if you can do something like that, very often it's a lot easier to get some buy-in. And so likewise, if you feel there's a better way, if you feel there's a nicer way to conduct yourself online, or a type of humor which is still funny but doesn't necessarily involve making people feel bad. Ideally, what you do is you demonstrate it, and you may get some angry responses for a while, but the hope is that if you stick to your convictions, people will realize the benefit and eventually come onto your side. All right, Merc needed. Find Trevor's remains and deliver them to his family. Location Highway 101. There's a popular saying among the Aldecados: she who lives in the hearts of her loved ones can never truly die. Trevor Brass might indeed live on in memory, but if he had to keep his butt planted instead of dealing with, if he had just kept his, sorry, but if he had just, I think it should be kept his butt planted instead of dealing with the wraiths, he'd still just be just plain alive. I digress. Yesterday, a man of mine spotted Trevor's car at the wraith's nest. The car had more holes in it than it started with, and the wraiths aren't known for taking prisoners. Trevor's relatives, as I mentioned, belong to the Aldecados. They aren't out for revenge, they just want to bury their son. Find Trevor's remains and help his family find peace. I was going to say, Trevor's family gets their vengeance if I mess up on the sneaking portion of this. By the way, I'll just comment, I have kind of half of a large coffee in front of me, but I did just get hit with sort of a huge wave of fatigue, so I'm going to try and still do a longer stream, but if I'm still feeling a little woozy, I may call it a little early. Again, that I'm nowhere near that right now, but I just wanted to sort of flag that ahead of time, just in case. Just in case I kind of deteriorate. Hi Morph TV, how are you doing? I don't believe I've encountered your broadcast before. How are you? How are you, and how are your people? Although I could, of course, ask your people directly. Let's see here. I might even get some Roach Racer in. All right, BD7A FF1C. You only YOLO once. So I'd probably prefer. Oh, no. Maybe that wasn't such a good idea. That did the trick. Job reward. Trevor, I heard you were looking for something from that downed AV nearabouts the dry well. What happened? So happens I found it. Interested? Who the fuck is this? Trevor from the Aldecados. What's this you're on about? I'd be happy to sell. Where's your camp? I'd rather deliver it to you. If you're worried for your family, why not just trade with them? Because you all are looking for it. We don't want any trouble, just money. Consider it a finder's fee. What I found for you really is a prize. Well then, Trevor from the Aldecados, come on, collect your own prize. New item, fresh implant in stock. Source boy from Aldecados, double rate. Discuss rate when I come take a look. We've done Euro winner and implants for cheap, cheap, cheap. Okay, BD 7A 55 1C. I don't think I can do a 7A beat up, but I can do it off this. So I will come back for the roach race, but I'd rather clear out the baddies. Very stealthy.
Get your ass over here. What is it now?
So I could really start using the distractions more. I tend to move around the environments a lot more than using the distractions, but yeah, no problem, iMorph TP. Thank you very much for your raid. Okay, let's see. I know Trevor's body's in this side of it, but really what I want to do here is clear out all the bad guys so that I can play some Roach Racer. I was also meaning to follow up a little bit on some of that discussion of platforms as relates to fixers and things like that. I guess one of the main points I wanted to make on it is it's not, I don't necessarily think it's sort of, the intention behind that isn't to sort of decode some hidden meaning inside of Cyberpunk or anything like that. But one of the things I always find kind of interesting about it is it's interesting to see how old ideas from something like Cyberpunk or these things that, I put it to you this way, like my idea of a fixer and my encounters with anything resembling a fixer definitely are in the context of some type of role-playing game. So, I don't commit crimes. I don't, have, any direct experience with being, with needing to, fence goods or whatever. But of course, I understand why that's an important role in, in the context of these games. But what is kind of funny is that, whether you want to say, gig economy or side hustles or whatever it is, this idea of an entity that takes care of a number of either the hazardous or costly or time-consuming parts of the job and takes a cut for that, is something that we're possibly a little bit more familiar with nowadays than we would be in, maybe the first time we played Shadowrun or something. I think Shadowrun was like the first RPG I ever played, so don't know which edition. It's definitely not the current one, and definitely not the first one, is all I can really say. I definitely think it was one of the later ones. But the other thing that's kind of fun about that idea too is that when you consider that role and the importance of that role and the setting in which these things are happening, it's also fair to say that we're probably closer to a Shadowrun or, Cyberpunk kind of world because the internet enabled all of these different types of jobs, right? Like Uber doesn't really work that well if you don't have the internet. In fact, it doesn't work that well if you don't have smartphones, right? So it's not even just that you need an internet, but you need sort of this relatively inexpensive internet available to everyone to be able to make these sorts of things happen. And again, same idea, right? Uber is your fixer. It takes a cut so that you can basically be a taxi service to someone. But on the other hand, there's some benefits to that as well. So it's one of these things that's kind of funny where I wouldn't necessarily have thought of fixers this way, but of course, being somewhat reflective of the world that I'm in right now, it definitely adds a fun little dimension to just something that's almost a kind of a cliche or a trope of the setting. Okay, the Nomad Cookbook from 2034. Aunt Mary Lou's Juicy Opossum Roast. 1 opossum, the fatter the better. 3 parsnips, 1 celery stalk, sin bacon, olive, is it pomace oil? Fry opossum and bake them together in oil until crisp, skimming any excess fat. Once browned, remove and set aside meat. Remove outer strings of celery, chop into small pieces, and boil in a separate pot. When soft, remove and blend with grated parsnip in a pan with the remaining oil until you have celery parsnip mousse. Thank you so much for the resubscription to Cree. We've long passed 2 years. I can't believe that. I think I saw in Discord that you were doing a broadcast, so I hope it went well, and I'm happy to have you stop by. Hope you're looking forward to the weekend. All right, when soft, remove and blend with grated parsnip in a pan with remaining oil until you have celery parsnip mousse. Add meat to a roasting dish and cover the mousse then cover with mousse and bake it at medium-high heat for 20 minutes. Remember that opossum pairs best with white turnip salad. Now you're prepared for the next big family dinner with this holiday crowd pleaser. Say it ain't soup. Snake meat, 2 types, water snake and rattlesnake, chicken scraps, pork bones, fish head, optional, various other scraps, lemon leaves, seasonal or synthetic veggies, cornstarch, fresh ginger sliced, dark soy sauce, and various spices to taste. The most important thing to remember about snake soup is that it shouldn't taste like snake. Step 1, chop everything that needs chopping. Step 2, chuck everything in a pot and boil for at least 6 hours. Step 3, add more of anything as needed for taste. Step 4, stir in cornstarch to thicken. I definitely have a couple thoughts on that, Justice to All. I did want to share, though, I don't recall the exact precedent, but when I saw the opossum food, I feel like I should mention that I think this was Calvin Coolidge. One of you may be able to correct me on this, but to my best understanding, there was a White House raccoon. There was a pet raccoon in the White House, and I believe it is because the raccoon was given by one of the constituents for the purposes of a dinner. They were supposed to cook and eat the raccoon, and whether the Coolidges were so enamored of the raccoon that they decided to keep it as a pet, or they just decided that they weren't raccoon eaters. The raccoon was adopted as a pet, but it was intended for the pot. I'm pretty sure there's photos of it, actually. But yeah, one of the things that's interesting about the idea of moving towards the dystopia depicted in cyberpunk stories, Justice to All, is that when you think of these stories, they are, to a certain extent, the people making these stories are already reacting to the world as they saw it. So in an earlier broadcast, I talked a bit about... actually, you know what? I think I'm going to try and do some road tracer while I talk about this. So I talked about W. Edwards Deming, and he was someone from the U.S. Census Bureau, I believe, who... oh, wait, do we not have... Oh, no, here we go. And it's Roach Race, not Roach Racer. But he was brought into Japan to sort of help with the reconstruction effort. But he introduced a style of management that was widely adopted in Japan and actually led to this tremendous productivity growth. So this is sort of where like the Sonys and the Toyotas come from. There is actually an W. Edwards Deming Prize in Japan that's still awarded. And he's got in my opinion, a pretty interesting book called Out of the Crisis, because what happened was there was this tremendous productivity bust in the United States, and Japan was enjoying this productivity boom. And one of the ways that manifested itself were these Japanese conglomerates buying up a lot of U.S. businesses. And so while this was certainly not his intent, this mildly cranky, statistician, originally from the Census Bureau, is one of the reasons why we have so many Japanese megacorps in like Neuromancer or Blade Runner or Cyberpunk 2077. And because in the end they're just sort of reflecting on sort of the state of the world as it was then, and this seemingly unstoppable juggernaut of Japanese industry. Of course, we know that Japan, with the benefit of having been born and sort of growing up in a later part of history, we know that Japan sort of had this lost decade, and North America got out of its productivity slump. But even aside from the the details of the specific business concerns, let's say, you do have this critique of capitalism. This is being written around like the late 70s or 80s. If you watch movies around that time, you've got one, Pink Floyd's Learning to Fly. I think that's the name of the song. Playing on the soundtrack of just about every single movie. But it was one of those times where it kind of feels like, a certain type of conservatism was cool. So through my lifetime, more progressive ideas have usually been more mainstream, right? Like we tend to associate that with Hollywood and that. Whereas if you kind of take a look at the ideals of around that time, I'm maybe not so convinced that, like, again, I'm sure that there would be, democratic movie stars, and there would be, there would be causes, and I don't want to try and suggest that it was some sort of right-wing paradise or something like that. But in terms of like dominant cultural ideas, I think this idea of sort of feeling like you could make lots of money and that it was a good thing to make lots of money, that sort of like being a yuppie would be aspirational as opposed to some sort of, dirty word. At least when I kind of take a look at some of this stuff from around that time, that's the impression that I get. And obviously my impressions are going to be colored by the types of movies I like watching, so that may not be a very accurate view of the world as it was at that time. But I think one of the things I feel so bad about that. So I think one of the things that's worth remembering, though, is that when we think about any worries of falling into the dystopias displayed in Cyberpunk, it's always useful to remember the conditions under which some of these authors were writing these stories, or filmmakers, or what have you. And so to a certain extent, we have lived in a world that's familiar enough with these settings that people were able to write the stories, and that the readers were sort of able to understand that they weren't just talking about the future. And in fact, it's also kind of interesting to see some of the different ways in which cyberpunk stories that were written in that first wave, as opposed to modern ones, come out. So for instance, I don't know how many people remember this, but the book Neuromancer actually ends in space. And you can kind of see how, when William Gibson was writing that, the idea that we'd sort of not spend that much time in space, right? That the promise of sort of the space race wouldn't really be realized. That wasn't quite there yet, right? You just sort of extrapolate from what you see, and we're able to go to the moon. We do satellites. It stands to reason that we're going to have some kind of common habitat in space, right? The idea of a private citizen going to space, and not just going to space in the kind of space tourism we see now, but for an extended stay, just kind of seemed to be a natural extrapolation of the world as it was going. But for some reason, the idea of having a mobile phone wasn't something that could, that was something that kind of escaped William Gibson writing Neuromancer. That's obviously not a criticism of it. It's just an indication in terms of how you can actually see some of these symbols in terms of what the world was like when that book was being written. So I guess the depressing part about it is that in the sense that the cyberpunk genre exists at all, it exists because there was a set of concerns that were recognizable to the audience at the time. And that, there was a certain hyperbole going on there, right? Like, we do not, in fact, live in a world where, the world is effectively run by mega corporations, and, hacking is a legitimate line of business for people who don't want to conform or what have you. And again, I have some thoughts about that. Like, I think, when you have the concept of the internet or the matrix or cyberspace, a quite literal world of ideas, and these sort of hacker characters, ones who play against the rules, like, of course writers are going to want to write about people like that. They're the hackers. They're the people who go off into the world of ideas and and do things that other people don't think are possible. But it is kind of worth thinking about the fact that these are actually very old concerns. Now, that may be depressing in the sense that maybe we just don't learn, and there's no comfort that can be drawn from that. And of course, I don't think anybody would consider Cyberpunk to be aspirational. I think one of the really interesting things about Cyberpunk 2077 is that it does communicate that the standard of living for even the very wealthy is not necessarily as good as, say, an upper middle class existence in earlier years. And that's because, corrupt systems are not efficient systems, right? So I actually quite like that critique in Cyberpunk 2077, because it sort of recognizes that the ideal of capitalism, of course, is the competition to drive down prices and, improve living standards, basically. And that, yes, there is wealth generated. So there may be sort of inequality in the sense that there is very large wealth that's generated in these markets, but the way that you wind up generating that wealth is by, outcompeting your, the rival businesses, which of course has a broader social benefit. Or, like, I guess another way of putting it would be that, Walmart comes in And like all of a sudden, you know, I don't know, you become like a Walmart company town. Everybody works for Walmart. And in fact, everybody's nominal wages let's say it goes down by like 5%. But the fact that Walmart runs everything, and they're really good at logistics, causes the prices of everything to fall 10%. That's actually 5% welfare, even though obviously that's great for Walmart, and like people would obviously complain about that. Although again, as far as mathematically, the living standards have actually gone up. But of course, the point about Cyberpunk is that you don't have those, you know, those benign examples. What's happening is you have a tremendous amount of concentration of wealth and influence, and it's used to exercise this market power. And so the result is that it really sucks to be poor in this world, but it also kind of sucks to be rich, because the engine of progress is basically stalled. It's broken. And it's broken through that, you know, kind of that continuation of the conditions under which the genre or the setting was first set. I see there's a couple messages in chat, but I'm moving too fast in the racer. I'm gonna try and see what's going on. So again, I don't know if we can take any comfort in the fact that like, oh yeah, don't worry, it's been horrible before. Because again, we should not wish for a world in which, you know, it's so dangerous to get medical care that you need armed ambulances that cost a fortune, or that the world has become so lawless that it's actually possible to have your cyberware cut out of you, and that, you know, if you don't have a premium protection package, you know, you can't expect any help if that happens to you. But on the other hand, I will say that because in the end there is a degree of satire of a world that we've already lived in, I think we're well equipped to be able to see cyberpunk around us, because in the end a number of those concerns never were really resolved. Yeah, so I don't know if you were here for that earlier part, iMorph TV, but I actually have a specific name to that, W. Edwards Deming, who introduced sort of a set of management principles and sort of productivity tools that were really embraced in Japan during its reconstruction that didn't seem to sort of take root in the United States. And it's why you don't just have megacorps, but you specifically have corps like Arasaka, and certainly, why did I do that? It's why it's specifically Japanese megacorps, because of that contribution. And again, I don't necessarily know if Out of the Crisis is as relevant today, because I don't know how many of those principles apply to services and knowledge work. But there was that. I think there was actually a television program. It might be called "If Japan Can Do It, Why Can't We?" Now the one problem is that the stuff that he taught, I think, was eventually turned into Six Sigma, which I think is a little bit of a joke. I mean, I think it's self-parody when they call each other black belts, but I would say, you know, the fact that Japan has a W. Edwards Deming Prize is an indication that at least the fundamentals were good enough to produce some tremendous prosperity. But yeah, I don't know, Justice Sowell. I can't necessarily say that. So I think the one thing that a lot of people would like to hear is like, this can never happen. And I guess the thing is that the fact that we have cyberpunk in the first place meant that we've lived in a world in which this stuff wasn't unthinkable. But I also reflect on the fact that because this stuff exists, I think, and because, let's face it, these are really good writers, these are good storytellers, and they were able to to give a warning that got people to pay attention. I also think that we're primed to see these things happen in the world. For instance, for a couple of hours, I've been sitting here playing an arcade game called Cyberpunk. But inside Cyberpunk, I waste my time on a mission when I could be finding a body. Instead, I'm pursuing apples and carrots. Actually, it occurred to me it's been a while since I've read the opening passage of Out of the Crisis, so maybe after... All right, that's it. I actually have bookshelves now, so I can... actually can get this thing pretty quick. So yeah, I think I'll just read from the preface for Out of the Crisis. So this book was written in 1982. Might be as old as the Cyberpunk setting, the Cyberpunk 2020 setting, as far as I know. All right. Let's preface. The aim of this book is the transformation of the style of American management. Transformation of American style of management is not a job of reconstruction, nor is it revision. It requires a whole new structure from foundation upward. Mutation might be the word, except that mutation implies unordered spontaneity. Transformation must take place with directed effort. The aim of this book is to supply the direction. Need for transformation of governmental relations with industry is also necessary, as will be obvious. Failure of management to plan for the future and to foresee problems has brought about a waste of manpower, of materials, and of machine time, all of which raise the manufacturer's cost and price that the purchaser must pay. The consumer is not always willing to subsidize this waste. The inevitable result is loss of market. Loss of market begets unemployment. Performance of management should be measured by the potential to stay in business, to protect investment, to ensure future dividends and jobs through improvement of product and service for the future, not by the quarterly dividend. It is no longer socially acceptable to dump employees on the heap of unemployed. Loss of market and resulting unemployment are not foreordained. They are not inevitable. They are man-made. The basic cause of sickness in American industry and resulting unemployment is failure of top management to manage. He that sells not can buy not. The causes usually cited for failure of a company are costs of startup, overruns on costs, depreciation of excess inventory, competition, anything but the actual cause. Pure and simple bad management. What must management do? Management obviously have a new job. Where can management learn about the transformation that is necessary? The fact that management cannot learn by experience alone what they must do to improve quality and productivity and the competitive position of the company. The fact is that management cannot learn by experience alone what they must do to improve quality and productivity and the competitive position of the company. Everyone doing his best is not the answer. It is first necessary that people know what to do. Drastic changes are required. The first step is the transformation is to learn how to change. That is, to understand and use the 14 points in Chapter 2. I think Okay, actually, I'm going to read the full preface because some of this will be sound mildly prophetic. But yeah, the first step in the transformation is to learn how to change. That is, to understand and use the 14 points in Chapter 2 and to cure themselves of the diseases in Chapter 3. Long-term commitment to new learning and new philosophy is required of any management that seeks transformation. The timid and the faint-hearted and people that expect quick results are doomed to disappointment. Solving problems, big problems and little problems, will not halt the decline of American industry, nor will expansion in use of computers, gadgets, and robotic machinery. Benefits from massive expansion of new machinery also constitute a vain hope. Massive immediate expansion in the teaching of statistical methods to production workers is not the answer either, nor wholesale flashes of quality control circles, QC circles. All these activities make their contribution, but only prolong the life of the patient. They cannot halt the decline. Only transformation of the American style of management and of governmental relations with industry can halt the decline and give American industry a chance to lead the world again. The job of management is inseparable from the welfare of the company. Mobility, while here a while and gone, from the management of one company to the management of another, is something that American industry can no longer afford. Management must declare a policy for the future, to stay in business and to provide jobs for their people and more jobs. Management must understand design of product and of service, procurement of materials, problems of production, process control, and barriers on the job that rob the hourly worker of his birthright, the right to pride in workmanship. There are conferences almost any day in this country on the subject of productivity, mostly concerned with gadgets and measures of productivity. As William E. Conway said, measurements of productivity are like accident statistics. They tell you that there is a problem, but they don't do anything about accidents. This book is an attempt to improve productivity, not just to measure it. This book makes no distinction between manufacturing and service industries. Service industries include government service, among which are education and the mail. All industries, manufacturing and service, are subject to the same principles of management. Anyone in management requires, for transformation, some rudimentary knowledge about science, in particular, something about the nature of variation and about operational definitions. Numerous examples throughout the book illustrate how failure to appreciate the two kinds of variation, special causes of variation and common causes, and to understand operational definitions brings loss and demoralization. The reader will sense the fact that not only is the style of American management unfitted for this economic age, but that many government regulations and the Justice Department's antitrust division are out of step, propelling American industry along the path of decline, contrary to the well-being of the American people. For example, unfriendly takeover and leveraged buyout are a cancer in the American system. Fear of takeover, along with emphasis on the quarterly dividend, defeats constancy of purpose. Without constancy of purpose to stay in business by providing product and service that have a market, there will be a further downturn and more unemployment. What is the Securities and Exchange Commission doing about takeover? When we size up the job ahead, it is obvious that a long and thorny road lies ahead, decades. Dependence on protection by tariffs and laws to buy American only encourages incompetence. It would be incorrect to leave the reader with the impression that no action is taking place. The fact is that management throughout a number of companies are at work on the 14 points and on the diseases that afflict American industry. Substantial results are already recorded. Some schools of business are offering courses in the transformation of the American style of management based on notes for seminars conducted during the past few years. Now, I was actually looking for the first chapter, which was... it's the first parts that I actually find the most amusing, where he's basically yelling at managers as the main problem. But there's I'll maybe do a little bit of the first chapter just to give you a flavor of that, but I'm not going to do the whole couple of pages. Some folklore. Folklore has it in America that quality and production are incompatible. That is, you cannot have both. A plant manager will usually tell you that it is either or. In his experience, if he pushes quality, he falls behind in production. If he pushes production, his quality suffers. This will be his experience when he knows not what quality is, nor how to achieve it. A clear, concise answer came forth in a meeting with 22 production workers, all union representatives, in response to my question, why is it that productivity increases as quality improves? Answer, less rework. There is no better answer. Another version often comes forth, not so much waste. Quality to the production worker means that his performance satisfies him, provides to him pride of workmanship. And yeah, then there's some material about Awakening in Japan. But yeah, the less rework. Now, again, the drawback here, right, is that there's a certain point here where if you come in the middle of the stream and I'm reading this, you will kind of think it's like, oh God, is this one of them grind set streams, right? Like, why is this guy talking about business stuff? But what I find interesting about this book, right, is this is a neat little time capsule describing the very problems that are kind of the basis for a lot of the dystopia in Cyberpunk. I actually started reading this because of another book. It's a book on statistics called The Lady Tasting Tea. A wonderfully readable history of statistics, by the way. If you like sort of popular science books, I actually think that's a pretty good one to read, because it feels, at least from what I know of statistics, it doesn't seem to have been misleading or oversimplify, which is often a problem with popular science books. But it's also full of some just kind of neat anecdotes and little details, and gives you an appreciation in terms of why that specific innovation, why statistical methods had such an important role to play in advancements across the sciences. But when I got to the chapter on Deming, I actually was working at a statistical agency at the time. So they had a library there, and they had a copy of Out of the Crisis. And I was fascinated enough by it that I got a used copy. And not only that, I got the used copy for a song. I think it cost me less than $10. But there's an inscription in the opening, and on the front page, it actually has Deming's signature, signed 1988. So I have a signed copy of Out of the Crisis, although I don't think it would have been possible for me to meet the man himself. Anyway, I think I'm going to do one more round of Roach Race, and then we will we'll try and get the body. One of the things I kind of like about some of the, I guess, the follow-ons to Cyberpunk. So like William Gibson and Bruce Sterling did a book called The Difference Engine, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the origin of the steampunk genre, I think. I think that's right, but I could be wrong. But it's always kind of neat to see how the, like it does sort of feel that for each of these kind of offshoots or subgenres, it's always sort of this engine of economic progress that's in the title, right? So Cyberpunk, I don't think it's the cybernetics that's really the engine of progress. It kind of feels more like cyberspace, the internet. Is probably the key driver, but of course steampunk, right? Steam engines being the engine of economic progress. Solarpunk, probably a little bit more aspirational in this case. Also dieselpunk, less aspirational, let's say. Actually, I never thought of it this way, but I've never really played these games, but I know that the Fallout games are sort of full of atomic applications of just about everything, which does actually have some historical precedent. So is anybody familiar with either Project Cauldron or Project Oil Sands? Or maybe it's Oil Sands. I know Vanguard Master is, because I messaged him about it, but for the Canadians here, you will not find any more Albertan proposal. But I guess the question would be, would Fallout count as atom punk? Because atomic energy is sort of everywhere. probably feels like a bridge too far in terms of trying to come up with new punks, but still a fun idea. But yeah, I'll try and explain Project Cauldron or Project Oil Sand. So it was renamed from Project Cauldron to try and get some buy-in. But there was, after the Second World War, there was this project called Operation Plowshares, and with the idea of beating swords into plowshares, and effectively it was looking for peaceful applications of atomic weapons. So one of them was an effort to basically blow up. So when I say blow up a harbor in Alaska, what I actually mean is use the bomb to blow up parts of Alaska to create a harbor. Clearly they did not actually follow through on that, and it turns out, I think the sort of supplemental study that they did found that it would have been sort of locked behind ice for 9 months of the year. But Project Oil Sand was one where they planned to take, and I don't know why I thought I was going to be able to do that. They were going to take an atomic bomb underneath the ground, and it's like super fracking. They basically just blow up the oil. Basically they'd like blow up the underground, and then you just kind of scoop up the oil that was there. I believe Edward Teller was a big supporter of these ideas, so it's kind of a real-life Dr. Strangelove.
Well, what do we have here?
Transport's already waiting, V. What took you so long? I was playing video games. Another show which I haven't seen all of, I've talked about it before, but I just...
All right, load them in the back. Time to go home, Trevor.
Just in terms of sort of the time under which some of this stuff would have been written or conceived.
V, Trevor's parents can finally give their boy a proper burial. Thank you. Truly. Contract closed.
But I really do like the FX series, The Americans. Again, I haven't seen it the whole way through, but I've seen enough to know and like it. The main thing I like about it is I actually think it's really clever in basically telling kind of a domestic drama, but through the lens of a kind of like a spy thriller. So you have like, what are mom and dad getting up to, when we can't see them? But in this case, they actually have a really big secret. So for those of you not familiar with it, The Americans concerns the Jennings family, which are part of the illegals program, which as far as I can tell is still going on. I know there was a prisoner exchange that was done, and I believe there were a couple of illegals as part of that, but I'm not really equipped to talk about that with authority, but I'm pretty sure it's the same program. But effectively, like, these are people who have assumed the identities of genuine Americans, and are raising a family, but are essentially conducting operations on American soil. So again, it's kind of a fun it's a fun premise on its own as a story. I believe the origins of that show actually were the showrunner apparently genuinely worked for the CIA. And in his interview, they had asked something along the lines of like, are you trying to join the CIA so that you can write a book or a movie based off of what you see? And apparently like his idea was like, well, I wasn't thinking of it, but it actually kind of sounds like a good idea now. And so, yeah, apparently that's sort of the genesis of the Americans. It's always hard to tell like how genuine those kinds of stories are, because we always tend to piece everything together after the fact. But it's one of those like too good to check stories. But the other thing I find kind of interesting about it, of course, is it takes place, I guess, around the early 80s. So the characters, for the most part, you have the perspective of Soviet agents. So, having grown up in North America, I have sort of this image of like Ronald Reagan as, sort of this position of American strength and resurgence, and, someone who stood up to the Soviet Union. Whereas, the characters which, by the way, I'm not trying to sound like some big Reagan fan or whatever, but like obviously he's someone who, most situations you run into, you're probably going to hear broadly positive views of him. And of course, certainly if you look at the electoral results, very successful politician. Whereas, from the characters in the Americans, it's this sort of like it's the sort of the figure that you get when you read stuff like J.G. Ballard's like Why I Want to Fuck Ronald Reagan. I think that was the essay. It was in the Atrocity exhibition, and I know we read it on the stream at one point. But for him, it's like sort of this monster who's willing to do anything. And there's a couple of really interesting moments where things that do seem to be KGB screw ups are wind up just being this example of the lengths to which the Americans will leave traps for us to destroy our boys. Like it's just one of these things that's really interesting to have a different perspective on. Because the main characters are not necessarily the characters that I would that I have my immediate associations with. And again, I'm not trying to suggest I make communist jokes in other streams. I would not say that my sympathies lie with the Soviet Union. I actually walked by a park where there was a Soviet cipher clerk who kind of fell in love with Canada and defected, and kind of advised about how widely Canadian security services and the government was penetrated by Soviet agents. And that actually predated, I believe it predated the Long Telegram, and I believe it predated Churchill's Iron Curtain speech. But again, it's not, you tend not to really hear about Canada in the early Cold War as much. But yeah, needless to say, not a big fan of the Soviet Union. But obviously it's kind of interesting to watch a show with a different set of premises. But it's also kind of fun because I don't think they try to do the Mad Men thing of like really rubbing it in your face in terms of how different that age was. So, kind of the casual sexism and like the littering and chain smoking and things like that, even the racism, are all things that I think Mad Men really highlights to try and communicate how different the world is. And I think part of that is also to accentuate how the character Don Draper will show you how, like, to sort of be able to appreciate the insights that he has, not just in the culture, but in the changes happening inside of the culture. But I think The Americans does have an interesting, it does play with that a little bit, in the sense that you do have characters who don't take certain things for granted. So, the ARPANET and the character Phil Jennings, one of the agents, has to have one of the scientists explain basically what this prototypical internet is. And, he still doesn't really get it. But of course, everybody watching it is going to is not going to require that explanation. And I like that sort of stuff, again, for the same reason I like reading Deming, and the same reason why I like a lot of this stuff, is that Cyberpunk 2077 is definitely a product of, the modern age, but it does try to stay true to its source material. And its source material is actually informed by a number of concerns that, are starting to get to the point that they're potentially as alien to us as something that, like, Mad Men might be to the audience watching it. And even Mad Men's kind of an old show now. So it's nice to kind of try and find where you can these little touchstones to just sort of see the perspective and see where the setting is coming from for some of these things. And it's not even necessarily so that you can appreciate the history of it, but it's so that when you see, you can kind of appreciate some of the neat ways in which Cyberpunk 2077 has sort of modernized some of these ideas. And also, in my opinion, I think there's some cases where you can see maybe even some disappointment where they didn't follow up on certain things. Like, I kind of think it would be neat if you could see more of the poser gangs. But I also appreciate this is an absolutely enormous game and you kind of pick your battles. But that would be an example of something that I kind of think would fit. And I think it would also fit in, an age of influencers, these ideas of these gangs that are trying to take on a certain type of image. It's not just influencers, where I'm usually thinking of streams, but, Instagram, TikTok, there's a number of these things. I kind of feel the poser gangs actually fit really, really well in a time like that. But I think there's a sequel coming up, so maybe there'll be time for that in the future. All right, people are starting to talk about you, the kind of people who have bigger snakes to fry. Starting from now, we'll be accepting their high-value custom. Congratulations, you deserve it. I'll confess, I think I just naturally do the Badlands at the end, but it's also a little weird to be out of Night City with all of these wide areas. I think this one I rescue a nomad in.
Hey, I need your help. I've lost contact with Benedict McAdams and the driver who was supposed to get him out of town. Head to the coordinates I gave you. See what you can find. More details attached.
SOS Merc needed. Find Benedict McAdams, Clement Street. A fixer's worth no more and no less than their last promise. And I promised Benedict McAdams I'd get him out of town once he checked off a job for me. Benedict's one devil of a pro, just 6 hours in of taking the job, and Councilman McLean's heart beat for the last time. That fat fish I'd had dangling on my line too long. The risk of a slip-up was high, so before he set to it, Benedict installed a GPS in his biomon so I could have an eye in the sky on him, as it were. This slickster didn't work alone, mind you. Had a driver, Jackson Walldriver. The problem is, instead of hauling quick across the border, Jason went off route. Something here stinks worse than McLean's fishy corpse. Find them and bring me Benedict. I'll find him a new driver. Should probably ping just to make sure that there isn't...
Okay, okay. So, did you think it over? Well, of course, if you can't fit it in your budget. Too scary a sum for all those lightweights at Militech, I suppose. Nah, not gonna work. Better get going. Hear his skull calling for a bullet. No, not worth keeping him here.
Jason Walldriver, heard you're looking for Ben McAdams. Well, you're in luck. Got him right here, and he isn't going anywhere. Could be yours for the right price. How much? I want 5 times more than the lead head from last year. Final offer. I'll relay it to my superior, authorized to make these kinds of decisions. We'll be in touch. Right, fucking Militech always calls the shots, don't they? We certainly don't let the shots call themselves. I'll just let him figure out if he wants a nap or not. Probably should have used the camera to see what I'm up against down below, but I'll live dangerously.
Huh. A new face. See, Militech's been investing in young talent. So, you here to take me on a little field trip?
Why'd Militech want to buy you off of Jason?
What? You missed the memo? That NCC crook McLean. Militech bought him off. Drafted bills he passed without a blink. I took the bastard out. Now they're desperate to find a fall guy. Don't want the NCPD looking too close into the matter.
As upstanding citizens would do.
Militech's gladly gonna pin me for a heap other things, since I'm already here. I can only surmise I'll be so desperate as to end up taking my own life, as they say.
Sorry to hear that. I'm here on Dakota's behalf.
For Christ's sakes, now you're telling me? I loathe it, this whole playing tough in the face of death thing.
Handled yourself well.
Should have seen how that fool Jason gobbled it up. Even started holstering in the small of the back like me.
All right, let's get you out of here.
Oh, shit. I feel like I haven't used my legs for a straight month.
So I can't remember if I need to take the... I guess I do need to take the car. Oh, no, that's fine. All right.
You know what I miss most in that basement?
Booze, cigs.
Melons. Those sweet honey melons Dakota folks got growing on genetic mismatch. Miles above any sin melons you can find.
Okay.
I sat there thinking what I wouldn't give one taste of that sweet melon. Of course, that prick Jason entertained the thought.
This ain't some kind of metaphor, is it? See, he's the talkative sort. Here comes the sun.
Hey, McAdams, over here.
Starkey. It's been years.
You look like shit.
I'm a bit indisposed. Looks like you'll have to be my chauffeur.
V, FYI, Dakota's sending over your payment.
Nova, thanks. Have a good one.
Got intel that Benedict's safe. I hope this time the driver doesn't disappoint. Thanks, V. Gig closed. So I'm going to take a quick peek. I think we've got at least one more mission in this current batch. Yeah. I'm going to try and get one more done, but I think I might call it after that. I don't think it's the end of the world if we have, you know, 2 more missions to do. I don't think it's the end of the world if we have 2 missions to do at the start of next week's stream, and then we go back to main mission.
Curb the enthusiasm, kid.
Did he just tell me I was driving too fast? A little too early there. Okay. I'm really not sure what to expect on this one. I've been trying to think. I'm sorry I've been so quiet, but I'm trying to think what mission this is. Because I don't normally associate Dakota's missions with being in sort of an industrial area. Maniac!
Time's running out.
Well, I guess technically it's not in the city. Oh, this is the one where I gotta steal something out of the... yeah, this is a scrapyard I gotta steal something out of.
Avi, I have some new work for you. A certain item needs to be salvaged from the landfill before some gonks chop it to pieces. I've attached some more details for you.
Okay. Thievery. Retrieve data from broken training bot. Warbler Lake Hazardous Waste Facility, Anderson Street. There's this kid, folks call him Joe. Red Joe. Now, this Joe kid has talent, knows his hooks and his jabs. I swear he could knock a horse's teeth out. Point is, kid's got what it takes to go pro. Problem is, coaches aren't easy to come by in the Badlands. But lo and behold, word is a next-gen sparring bot's landed in a scrapyard there, still in working order. That's city folk for you. Second a piece of tech glitches, it gets tossed out in the trash, soft included. Anyway, back to the bot. Find and download its software before they recycle it into metal straws or whatever it is NC people like. Oh, and one more thing. The guy that runs the landfill, watch out for him. Real piece of work. Who is Lizzie Wizzy pretending to be? We are who we pretend to be. I've pretended to be everything. That's why I found the truth. Lizzie Wizzy is an artist par excellence. Her work includes award-winning albums and concert tours, film appearances, as well as, for lack of a better term, conceptual performance art. Her latest artistic obsession features the medium of brain dance. In recent interviews, Lizzie mused about the boundary between our documentation of reality versus our active shaping of it. Could that mean Lizzie Wizzy plans to scroll her own BD? We can only dream. The chance to live just one day in her chrome skin. Fans would go wild.
Wow, what a beautiful dump you've got here.
Fuck you.
I'm looking for a training bot. I heard it might have passed through your hands.
Training bot, you say? Let me see. Perhaps you want Dalbot. Slightly worn and torn, missing legs, but...
Tempting, but no, thanks.
Suit yourself. Training bot. Yes, I have one. But only for sale. And it won't be cheap.
What do you take me for, gonk? Clunkers like that selling kabuki bazaars for ennies at the most.
If you come here just for that, it must be worth more.
Maybe a little, but not as much as you're trying to fleece me for.
Okay, fine. I take it down a notch. Now hurry up and pay.
50K?
Selling anything interesting?
That depends on what you're interested in.
Alright. I don't think it should be too much of a problem to sneak through the area here, but I do want to make sure that I'm not doing anything idiotic. Speaking of, too good of an opportunity not to take this guy out. Storm on the Mare Crisum, or Crisium? By now we're all avid viewers of the reality show that is Orbital Politics, except this is real life, and what happens up there could have real consequences for all of us down here. Recently, everyone's been talking about the attack on Ursula Courier, resulting in the complete loss of control in the lower half of her body. The media has been endlessly replaying remarks made by Courier's younger brother Wagner, who was also discussing the latest outfit worn by Yara Iodi to the official press conference where she denied rumors that Courier's family had any hand in her accident. I don't know about all of you, but with each passing day, the saying, "what happens in orbit stays in orbit," is starting to sound like dangerously wishful thinking.
Come on, let's go look.
Oh, come on. Oh, looks like I got it already. Fair enough. Don't mind me. Law abiding.
Beautiful, V. Red Joe's training starts tomorrow. Then it won't be long until you hear his name again. He has potential, that boy. Nice work. Until next time.
Figure might as well take advantage of the mission while it's here. By now, everybody in the Badlands has heard your name, V. You're moving into the big leagues here. Small compared to Night City, but big for us. You'll be getting more contracts from me soon. Okay. I think 2 inside?
This is your problem, not mine.
I don't like this.
Oops. Archive conversation, Merlin, Honorati, and Logan Smith. 3rd engine this month. Can't be a fucking coincidence. Where'd you fill up? The fuck's that got to do with that? Just tell me where you stopped for the true... That guy by the dump. Check and see if he's not watering down the fuel. Could be it. Alright, we're there. Fuck, Gonk straight admitted it. We'll hang around. Take it out of his unsuspecting clientele. First good idea you've had.
Shit! Thanks, stranger. That was a close one.
Okay, so I'm not ready to go to Afterlife yet. I do want to finish Dakota's missions. I believe there is one more. So I remember now, I believe you need to advance the story for Momar's last mission. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the same with Dakota, seeing as there's one more gig here, unless the 9th gig is the reward, but then by that logic I should also be getting the reward from Momar, so I would be willing to guess that there's actually just one more mission for me in the grand scheme of things. But before I do that, I'm also going to get a little bit of homework done. So for those of you only here for gameplay, I think this is it. I'm going to scrap some of these items to just get rid of any duplicates, and then we'll try and find somebody to host tonight, but I don't think I'll be doing any more missions. I know I've got about 40 minutes left in my normal time, but it is almost 2 in the morning, and I am really feeling quite sleepy. So I wish that weren't the case, but it's been a long week. Not a bad week, but definitely a long one, and it all just kind of caught up with me about half an hour ago. I'm definitely feeling like I need to turn in, so... Alright, so we got the Ashura, we've got the Nekotama, Grad, Achilles, SOR, okay. So no duplicates there. 2 Umbras. Pulsar, Dian, Guillotine, Saratoga. Not as many duplicates as I thought there would be. Okay, we've got 2 quasars. Both are 5++. This one's non-lethal, so I'll hang on to that. Nova, 2 overtures. So this is a tier 5 versus a 5+. Right, and then we'll do the same for the melee weapons. So clear out anything that isn't tier 5. 2 baseball bats. 130-112. Okay. The usual idea here is that I keep one of everything. If it really becomes a problem, then I can... Oh, we've got 2 of these. Both ++. All right, that works. But yeah, so I think I know it took me a while to get through all of the fixer stuff, but if I take a look at the map here, so I'll do Dakota's last mission, and then I guess it kind of comes down to a question: do I want to do all of these side jobs, or do I want to start pushing ahead? So there'd be X Factor, there'd be Down on the Street, and there'd be Ghost Town. I'm slightly inclined to take the side jobs, and part of that, I think the game's pretty good at warning you that you're going to have a point of no return. I think that happened at the end of Phantom Liberty. But I don't know, there's something kind of nice about seeing all that Night City has to offer. Also, the side jobs sort of announce themselves, and they don't really, like, they don't hide kind of the same way that gigs do. So I think maybe I'll work my way up through the side jobs. We'll make a decision in terms of, I'll probably do the Takamura mission first. Maybe Takamura, Afterlife, and then X Factor. We'll see. There's any number of ways that I can do that. But yeah, once the fixer jobs are done, I think the aim here is going to be like kind of push forward. So essentially push forward as far as I can in the main game, but deal with the side missions as they come up. So essentially there won't be these extended periods of just trying to get through all the material before. And what that'll do is there will be some point at which we catch up with where we were before Phantom Liberty came out. We'll be seeing all brand new stuff, but we won't be putting that on pause in order to be able to redo old missions. It's kind of one of the reasons why I've been doing it. Although it's also just fun to revisit some of the stuff. But again, all of that'll be happening in a future stream because I need some sleep. I think what I will be doing, I'll get all my stuff recorded over the weekend. I do need to meet a prof for dinner on Sunday. But I should be back for Monday and Wednesday as usual. Might do Ace Attorney. I might change it up. I'm not 100% sure where I'm at with that yet. But next Friday we'll definitely be doing more Cyberpunk. And again, doing some more Cyberpunk that aren't fixer jobs. And then, I don't know, once I finish a few games, I do have a few things I'd actually really like to get to that I've been waiting to get to. But I guess a lot of that sort of depends on, I don't have, I guess the big thing is I don't have that much free time. I can't add another day to streaming, which means I need to finish up what I've been working on so far. Anyways, unfortunately, given the hour, it looks like I don't have anybody who I'd normally host online. So usually I'd be either hosting, Revive Snow or Kilgore Trout. But looks like I have an empty friends list. I need to make some new friends. So I'm going to have to leave you all to your own devices. If you're looking for more Cyberpunk, there is the Cyberpunk button down below. As for the rest of you, maybe just hanging out for me, I wish you well. Good luck. Maybe get some sleep yourself, read a book, or do something. But yeah, I gotta wrap up. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you Monday. Until then, take care.